Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Evaluating for Inclusive Programming. This is the third webinar of the Combating Racism series in Libraries, Part 2. This webinar is sponsored by the Ethnic Services Roundtable, the Public Library section, and the Instruction, Development, Equity, and Access section. Thank you for attending this webinar on these very important topics. Before our speakers are introduced, just a few housekeeping notes. Please make sure your microphone and camera are off during the duration of the webinar. This will help us to improve the video and sound quality during the presentation. Please feel free to use the chat and/or the question and answer section with any comments or questions you have throughout the webinar, and then we will take the time to answer them at the end. This webinar and all webinars in the series are being recorded and will be sent to you in a follow-up email within a week's time after the session. And we will also be sending out a follow-up survey directly after the webinar, and your feedback is very important to us. We have Kelly Yim on our presentation today, who is going to introduce our speakers, so I will let you take it away, Kelly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Yim. I am the past president of Public Library Section and supervising librarian at the New York Public Library. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our second annual webinar series of Combating Racism in Libraries, Creating Spaces to Educate and Inform Our Communities. And before we begin, I'd like to take this moment of silence to remember this day as the second anniversary of George Floyd's murder. His death began a movement to address the racial injustice in policing. So please join me now in a moment of silence. Thank you. And now I am pleased to begin the program. I'd like to start by welcoming you today to today's event, Evaluating for Inclusive Programming. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our speakers today, Sharon Myrie and Michelle Hamil. Sharon has a broad wealth of experience in nonprofit management, citywide programs administration, and policy implementation. Sharon currently serves as a Vice President of Programs and Services for the Queens Public Library, where she oversees programs and services supporting 66 locations in Queens, New York. Sharon holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Psychology from Ithaca College and a law degree from the George Washington University Law School. Michelle is known and respected throughout Maryland libraries as an extraordinary leader with enhanced leadership skills and exceptional judgment. As Chief Operating Officer, Michelle leads the mission, vision, innovation, and operations of the 19 branches and the County Detention Center. Her seasoned experience, dedication, and leadership has contributed to some of the library's most high-profile initiatives, including developing a strategic framework for a system-wide approach to race and social equity work. She holds a master's degree in library science and a Bachelor of Science degree in business administration. Sharon and Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kelly. I hope everyone can hear me. Great, it's a pleasure to be here for the NYLA conference, and Kelly, thank you for extending that moment of silence in a day like today, as we also reflect on so many tragedies that have occurred from yesterday and yesterday's in Texas and Buffalo and in California. It's really a hard moment for us to talk about a lot of things, but I think today, going back and noting the 2-year anniversary, which actually today, as I was looking at the news, very little coverage in terms of George Floyd's death, which is disheartening. But I think what's great is programs like this and the work that continues at our libraries across the country, and particularly here in New York, and to continue that hard work that we knew needed to be started many years ago, and certainly in the last couple of years. So I have the pleasure of sitting here or standing here today, and my colleague Casper invited me and, gave me a synopsis in terms of what you wanted to do today. And I wanted to be very clear with him that Queens Public Library, while we've done quite a bit of work, and particularly now, we have so much more work to do. And I feel somewhat guilty in standing up here today to talk about lessons and give takeaways that you can have. But I'm hoping within this hour and with the help of my colleague Michelle, that we can at least try to share with you some of the things that we've learned, in terms of being on the ground as a practitioner in this work. And from that, you can think of some of, you can go away with a little nugget of information. And I hope that this group will invite me or other colleagues who've been doing this work alongside of me in the next year or two to hold us accountable to the work that we're doing. So that's just my way of letting you know that I hope you go away with something. It may not be everything that was promised today, but I hope it will be an honest and open conversation. That's really what I want to achieve today. So for some of you who don't know Queens Public Library, we just celebrated our 125th year. As Kelly indicated, yes, please go to the second slide. We are at 65, 66 locations. We have about 1,300 part-time and full-time staff. We have about 940 plus active card holders. And as many people know, Queens is one of the most, if not the most diverse community in the United States, with well over 200 languages. We have, without reading, in terms of the populations of about 2.4, the Hispanic Latino community is about 28%, Asian is about 27%, white is about 25%, Black and African American is about 20.7%. Our budget is roughly about 165 million, and of that, about close to 10 million is through the programs that we run. Next slide. Just to give you a snapshot of our programming, we offered, and this is pre-pandemic numbers, about 84,000 classes, workshops, cultural events, and activities in 1 year. And as you can see, it's through a number of different groups. I, of course, oversee the Programs and Services Department, but by no means run or oversee all of the programs for Queens Public Library. A lot of programs come, in terms of those numbers, come out of the branches themselves. We have a community engagement team that works very similar to Michelle's work in the criminal justice areas, as well as at shelters for homeless families and other outreach kinds of activities. We have a really wonderful, robust team of folks who are focused on really archiving, documenting the community and our customers through various projects called Queens Memory. And of course, I think for many people, many libraries, we rely a lot on wonderful volunteers through our library friends. In PSD's area, we have programming from children, youth, families, teens. We have a mail book, like many of you, serving those who are at home. We have a New Americans program that's, I believe, one of the first in the country. We have a college readiness. We also focus on community health, and I'll get into that a little bit more as to why that's so important. And then a very robust folks focusing on our community learning, which includes our digital inclusion and workforce readiness. So going back now about the time that I got here, and I've been at Queens Public Library for about four years now. One of the things that struck me and other members of my team is, as I said in the earlier slide, we have so many different parts of the organization focusing on programming. But what we didn't have was a really specific focus on at least a limited number of programs where we could really articulate a theme across our 66 sites. And it was important to us to really take that moment to think about some key events that we all were doing and whether it would make sense on a lot of different levels to really bring all of our resources to the table and to provide programming around specific themes. And I think the cultural institutions do this quite well. If you look at a number of cultural institutions in your community, you probably likely can identify one or two major events that occur and that they're known for. And so with that in mind, and this was tough, and it's still a work in progress in trying to identify, because you never want to leave groups or celebrations out. But we thought that we'd start off with about 6 different programs that took place in the year. And the first one, in terms of our fiscal year, which runs from July through June, really actually comes around the holidays. And I give credit to the team really coming up with something that was reflective of all of the celebrations that we have around the holidays. And so we entitled it, It's Time for Kind, which was at a moment where we felt like everybody needed a little piece of kindness. And you know, it really did bring together so many ideas and thoughts. So a number of us from all different parts of the organization, including our communications team, our collections team, our marketing, obviously, representatives from the branches, from the libraries, as well as PSD, that's Program Services Department, and our volunteer group, all came together to really talk about programming. And so what stemmed from that was these 6 different programs that we call system-wide. And we included resources from each of our areas to really build this out. So we have It's Time for Kind, Black History Month, Women's History Month, and the logo there is, or the description is for this year's event. Also to National Library Week, and also Immigrant Heritage. We kind of sneaked it into a month. It's usually a week in New York City, but we stretched it out to a month. And what we are about to embark on now, at the end of our fiscal year, is our Pride Month. So with that, we've been able to really come up with themes. Sometimes it's just, it's time for kind, and we really rally around programming to develop that. And what this has done for us is to allow us to promote our programs much more holistically, which draws in opportunities for the press to really see us in this light. You know, because it's probably easier for press to sort of pick up of these stories if it's something coming out of one system as opposed to the different branches. We always want to build in and allow for the branches to continue to do what interests them around these themes, but by at least providing them with the theme itself and a little blurb, gets them to be thinking creatively on what they can do at their own individual branches. It also is another way of just allowing our customers to see equitably across the board that we are doing the same kinds of programming. So you may have a community that might say, well, I'm not sure, why do I need to do Black History Month? We as a library are committed to stating that across the system, we all celebrate Black History Month. If you can go to the next slide, please, Kelly. And here's an example of that. A few years back, we came up with a theme called Traveling Shoes, Black Migrations. And we created what was called a passport challenge. And here's the physical copy of this. And within this brochure, we came up with stamps. And it was a way of us highlighting, which probably people don't even notice when they come to their branches, artifacts or artwork or pieces that really have become a part of each particular branch. And so we would actually pull that out of a stamp and encourage the customers to go to our various branches across Queens. And there was actually a prize at the end of that. And it was a way to tells not only to provide Black history information, but also to highlight all of the great branches. You know, sometimes people really focus on their home branch, and that's wonderful. But you know, as we know, sometimes we have to shut down branches for repairs and so forth. And I think it was an opportunity for people to really see other branches that might be very close to their neighborhood or where they work. So this was a fun activity. We actually had a time date on that, so we can't just kind of recycle it. But we've heard a lot of great things, and I think there's a link that goes to tell you a little bit more about that. So that was some of the work that we were doing around our system-wide. Next slide, Kelly. Thank you. But in addition to this, now this is all pre-2020. And I don't know if Manny Figueroa is part of the audience today, but I really want to thank Manny for, he's the head of our training division here at Queens Public Library, but he, working with our chief of staff, really wanted to build out this focus that had come out of our most recent strategic plan, which is everyone is welcome here at Queens Public Library, certainly centering on the fact that we have so many different languages here. And so we really started to pull out, as part of our training, multiple topics, and you can see a list of those: building cultural competency, engaging young people in our library, which is always something that we want to try to address, understanding and serving people experiencing homelessness, and diversity and inclusion. And one particular thing that I also want to point out is that we developed a great partnership with the New York City's Department of Education, where we shared a facilitator and hosted it at our one of our main branches that has a great size auditorium, and it focused on implicit bias. And what was great is that DOE supported the facilitator, and we supported the space, and it was a chance for us to sit side by side with staff from DOE to focus on implicit bias and go through a day's training. And I would say pretty close to 100%, if not very close to that, of staff at some point. We did that multiple times, participated in that one-day session. In addition to that, we ran a lot of EDI dialogues, and that was focusing on gay pride and immigrant experience, disability awareness, and so forth. So we really started to hone in on really helping our staff to understand and appreciate diversity and equity. And this again was before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit us, as with this entire world. And we all, as we are slowly coming out of this, had to go into remote. And many of us, particularly on the program, to really start to focus on bringing virtual programming. And then the killing of George Floyd. And I think, like many of us, it was a time of reflection, a time for us to look not only outwardly, but also inwardly. And I recall and remember now 2 years ago, where President Walcott said, you know, what can we do? And we all agreed that, you know, we needed to express ourselves. And even though we were in a virtual setting, it was so important for us to have a place to just express our how we were feeling. And from that town hall meeting, I think it was a real awakening for us, particularly on the management level, to see that, you know, it wasn't just about the community and what the community in which we live, but also about what we could do as libraries, as a system, as an organization, to really look inwardly at ourselves. And while, you know, I can talk about some of the things that we did, you know, before 2020, we really didn't get it. We really didn't understand what it meant to really look at this issue in the ways in which I think the killing of not only George Floyd, but so many other individuals in that time frame. And so from that, we developed the President's Council for Racial Equity. We knew that we needed to look more inwardly. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to try to speed this up. We had our meeting back in October of 2020. Close to about 60 staff from across the system raised their hands that they wanted to participate this. We developed a steering committee of individuals and broke it down into various areas, which included programs and services, recruitment, hiring, promotion, learning and growth, marketing and outreach, and collections. And so everyone sort of decided on where they wanted to focus their attention. And over the last 2 years, we've been really digging and doing a really deep dive into looking at how we can improve as an organization as it's focusing on racial equity. So next slide, please. The work that we are doing that is separate and apart on the programming side, I just want to highlight some of those things. We are doing a human resources audit. And I will say that it's not just reflective of the people who are part of this council, but everyone throughout the organization is really support of the work that we're trying to do. And so it does involve our human resources, our procurement team, our collections, many of them who at the leadership level are part of the council, but even if they are not officially, unofficially, they are really working hard with us to look at some of these issues. We've identified that mentoring program is needed to really enhance future leadership in the organization. We're currently now doing a collections audit, and there's been a lot of work around ALA on doing collections audit. And I do also want to appreciate all of the work that's coming out of the library associations that help us to work in this area. We are now also looking at a disparity study through the MBWE vendor audit, because what we realized is, particularly here in Queens, and I think across country, like we are a really major employer here in Queens, and the opportunities that we give to our presenters, our vendors, is huge. For some of them, it's just the first time that they're really getting out there to show their work with an audience. And so we as an organization, and that's just on the programming side, but many other ways in which we need services, what is our responsibility and duty to ensure that we are giving and supporting a very broad, diverse population when it comes to providing these services. Also too, looking at our marketing, you know, we do a lot of marketing work and there's a lot of effort that goes into that, but are we really hitting the audience? I think we can all agree that as much as we can put in those resources for marketing, we can always do better and think of new creative tools to use to market to specific audiences. One of the things that we did do immediately was to have a Black Health and Healing virtual summit that took place in 2021 with the support of not only Queens Public Library, but the Black Caucus American Libraries Association. That was a 24-hour event and very, very successful. That was also supported by our President's Council. Next slide. And coming to the end, what I think on the program side, this is hard stuff. This is hard work, and Michelle will probably go into this a little bit more. But you know, yes, we know the definition in terms of what it takes to really look at a program, how to evaluate that program, focusing on whether it's effective, how can it be improved. But we also know that we have, for historically, we're a 125-year organization. We've got programs that have been going just on rote, just continuously, without any analysis, without any sense of going back to, is it really achieving the goals? We're just throwing it back out to the community and expecting that it's gonna, it's good because people come. But, you know, how much are we really sort of looking at that? And we also know that we have limited resources. Many of us are very much dependent on government dollars. So the ability to create more space to allow us to do new things that address new issues and needs, and no one can tell us that there aren't new needs that come up every day with our communities. I mean, I'm right now thinking about how to deal with issues about talking to your child who might be very scared to go to school the next day. There are just issues, and the library is such a great resource for that to happen. So we know that we have to do this work. And so one of the things that we try to do on the program side of the PCRE is to look and to analyze things. Next slide. You know, who is representing in terms of our presenter and our content? Is there equity across our 66 locations? You know, or is it just limited to those particular branches that we, you know, might say, well, they'll get it done and get it done well, you know? So we always have to ask ourselves to really take that hard look and make sure that we are, you know, really making sure that those limited resources are, you know, stretched appropriately across the whole system, and that any customer, no matter where they are in our Queens community, will get that same experience no matter what branch they may go to. We looked at our data. Our data was awful. I'm just clear. I mean, we thought, oh, maybe we could just go and look in terms of, you know, particularly on the Black experience, how many programs are we doing? We weren't capturing that information. And so, you know, with very frustration, we realized that we've got a lot of work ahead of us. So next slide. This is just a funny diagram, you know, like, you know, you have your plan and then you have reality, and that's kind of where we are. It's like reality, up, down, good, bad, you know, all different ways. And so we realized that, you know, not having the data, not being able to do baseline information about what we have and where we want to go requires a lot of help and support. Next slide. And so finally, we're realizing that we have to be more deliberate and purposeful. We all have blind spots. We have to make sure that we are hearing from all different sources, whether it's our staff or our customers. We have to set our specific goals, and we have to be mindful of equity wherever we are, whatever we're doing, you know, to just always build that in. We have, in most recent months, been funded by a major funder to help us to take the work that we're doing, because we're all doing our work and then we're really focusing on the DEI work, and it's hard to do both. So with the help of this funder, we are embarking on two major projects. One is to really do a much more deeper review of our programs. Next slide. And really see what we want to do as far as programming is concerned. We're also getting a consultant to come in to do a disparity study on our MBWE expenses or spending. And we hope to come up with a blueprint that will set us on a journey, on a more consistent, straight journey to where we want to be, and review our goals. And so, yes, of course, how can you not end with Maya Angelou? And because she was so wise and continues, we all continue to admire her good words. And in a way, I guess this is hopeful that you can't really know where you're going till you know where you've been. We spent quite a long time knowing where we've been, and now it's a chance for us to move ahead with the information that we learned. So thank you all. That's my contact information. I pass it on to my colleague, Michelle.
Thank you, Sharon. I took lots of notes, so thank you. Great presentation. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And I could say that the Queens Library System and Prince George's County Memorial Library System are sister systems, because our stats almost mirror each other. We don't have as many, the population is not as much as Queens. We have about almost 1 million residents in Prince George's County, but we are the most diverse county in the state of Maryland. We may be running neck and neck with Montgomery County. We are predominantly African American. The next largest population is Hispanic or Latin. And then we have many other representations from many other countries. We have a huge undocumented, lots of undocumented residents. And we have in our library system, at one point, and I'm going to say 9 years ago when I first joined Prince George's County Memorial Library System, the leadership was predominantly white in a majority minority county. The face of the organization is changing, and our leadership is not necessarily reflective of the communities that we serve, but we do have more Black and brown people on staff in leadership. So much like Queens, we started with our internal work. And one of the reasons we started internally is simply because if we can't get it right internally, we can't get it right externally. And we had a lot of things that we had to deal with internally. One of our strategic goals is inclusivity, but we were not as inclusive as we could be. So we started with developing a race and social equity team. And in the beginning, we wanted to call that, well, someone wanted to call the team IDEA for inclusivity, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. And I said that that really made it sound like a cute little team. And the work was not going to be cute. It was going to be difficult. Everyone who joined the team understood this was going to be long. We were in this for the long haul. That the work is never done, so you can never check a box. And if we put a cute little name on it, it was someone could easily check the box. So we did begin with developing a mission and vision, and we developed our own strategic framework. So we have, in addition to the strategic framework for the system, we have a race and social equity strategic framework. And that is to guide that race and social equity work. And we were also working with race and social equity, because if we get it right with race and social equity, we get it right for inclusivity and diversity. And so as we took a look at our system as a whole, we began with diversity training that started with bias training. We talked about the history of racism in libraries so that people would understand where the biases came from within the library systems, understanding that racism was in the DNA of libraries, and that libraries were not necessarily welcoming spaces, not welcoming spaces for persons of color on staff, and also not welcoming spaces for our customers, especially those customers who come from other countries and don't have an idea of what libraries really are. And so the internal work began. We looked at our collection. We just finished an audit, and we were going to start with focus groups after we did our staff survey. And then we decided that an audit wasn't necessary. We kind of broke down the information that we got. When I said audit wasn't necessary, the focus group wasn't necessary. And we kind of broke down our the audit into different groups. So it was talent and culture. That's what we call our HR department. We looked at the collection, we looked at programs and services, and we looked at support services. And in support services that included facilities. And one of the reasons we included facilities is because very often in library systems, the libraries that don't get a lot of attention to the facility are in lower income or predominantly minority neighborhoods. And as someone said, in our system, they look like the hand-me-downs of the libraries. They get the used furniture, or they get the thing that no other library branch wanted. The libraries that are beautiful and have magnificent fireplaces and wonderful new furniture are in the higher income communities, and when the majority of the people are not Black and brown. And so those kinds of things had to be addressed. So we used a system approach to addressing all of those areas. And one of the things that we ask for everything that we do is who benefits from this? So whether it's a program, whether it's a policy, whether it is buying new furniture, the first thing we should be asking is who benefits from this? After we ask of the program or the service or the activity that is going to happen, if it is a small group. So for example, one of the things that we did was during COVID, we wanted to offer STEM kits and make and take, STEM kits that people could take, our customers could take and keep. So it was decided that the libraries that had thriving STEM programs would get the STEM kits. Well, we already knew in our system that in certain areas, children were not exposed to STEM at all. Those libraries were not providing STEM programs, or the attendance was not good in those libraries. And so they weren't getting STEM kits. And this is COVID, when parents are looking for something for their children to do. And in communities where they couldn't necessarily go anywhere else to get activities, or couldn't afford to buy something from Amazon that would fill that need in the community. And I had to stop the program to say, well, how did you make this decision? Did you ask who benefited from this? And when they asked that question, they were able to say that only a few library customers in a few branches were going to benefit from this. And so we were able to spread the kits out, and the majority of the kits went to low income areas and areas where the children were not necessarily. So that got to some staff saying this was not equal, but we had to go back to our definitions and looked at what did equity mean? Because equity does not mean equal. Equity means the people who need it the most are getting it and getting those services. We also learned during COVID that the library could play an integral part in meeting the needs of the communities in a different way. We had food drives. We had coat giveaways. We had places for people to come to gather in the parking lot just to talk, because they needed the socialization but didn't know how they could do that. And so we also embarked on reaching out to our donors, because we recognize that some of our children, even though in our area, the cable providers, Comcast and Xfinity and Verizon, said that they were going to provide free access in the homes to for any school-age child in a public school. There were still some caveats. If their cable had ever been cut off, the parents were not able to get free access in their homes. There were a number of reasons that the children were not able to get access. And so we did a few things. We made sure we extended our Wi-Fi access to way beyond our parking lots. We took a look at the areas. We looked at our data. Data is so important to understand where your communities are that may not have access to the internet. And we provided Wi-Fi enabled Chromebooks to those communities so that the children could have access to learning in their homes. It was a new approach for us. We didn't care whether we got the Chromebooks back. It really was making sure that we became part of the community. We were an essential part of the community, and we were trying to fill a need. And I think that's where libraries often fall short. You know, we want I'm going to say a return on our investment. And the return is really what happens after we give them the tools. And it is if the people who took advantage of the programs and the services or equipment, are they able to thrive? And I think Sharon hit it on the head. We are still trying to figure that out. I don't know that libraries will ever have an effective way of evaluating how a person was able to thrive unless they share their stories. And I'm going to say to gather the stories. So many of our customers do get back to us to tell us how a program affected them. We had someone experiencing homelessness, and she talked about how the library staff not only helped her find housing, but we found housing outside of our county for her. And how grateful she was for that. And many like to take that, say thank you, and don't make a big deal, but we need to capture those stories. That's how we determine if our programs are effective or not, if it touches one who is willing to get back to us. We've had a multitude of programs, and like Sharon was saying, we have some celebrations that happen annually. So we have our system celebrations: African American History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, Indigenous Peoples Month, Asian Heritage Month. We celebrate Pride Month. Those are givens. Every library branch must celebrate those. And that means they need to have displays. They need to have and programs in those months. The other thing is, for this county, because our county is so diverse, we are not limited to doing those programs only annually. And so that's when the branch approach comes in. One of the things that I've always said, I'm African American 365 days a year. So, you know, I don't mind going to a program on my culture and heritage at any given time. So they're not confined to that time of year. And I think that some people even appreciate the fact that we offer programs throughout the year for a number of reasons. Months that are annual or national celebrations, that you can't go to everything. And so when you offer it, one, it says to the community, when you offer it outside of those months, it says to the community that we think this is important to celebrate all year long. But it also gives people an opportunity to have an experience when there isn't so much going on. And so that is always encouraged. So last month we had, was it last month? This is May. Yeah, so April, we were celebrating Black and Pride together. And it was an art competition, and then we added, and it was for teens. And so it wasn't tied to June. It wasn't tied to African American History Month, and it involved teens. So that is a way that you can be inclusive. And it addressed a need because we know that children can express, or teens express themselves through art. We also take a look at stats, what's happening in the news. There's so much that you have to pay attention to. One of our communities has a very high murder rate for transgender women. And we now participate in something called the Butterfly Project. We would never have known that, because it does not get national attention. We would not have known unless the branch staff was paying attention to what was happening in that community. And so what the Butterfly Project is the library has become a safe space for transgender women. And what we mean by that is they can come in if they are experiencing homelessness. We can connect them to services. And believe it or not, we actually have 2 librarians who do ride-alongs with the police officers at 3 a.m. And they wanted to do it. I said that our insurance would not cover them at that time. And the police department said they would not cover insurance for them, but the librarians wanted to do it. And they're really just out there when they see women working on the street. They know about the Butterfly Project. They've provided meals for them. So again, it is recognizing the need in the community. And these are predominantly African-American transgender women. One woman said that she really felt like it was the first time an organization cared about her. And so that becomes, again, part of that evaluation. The library system, if we were not paying attention to what's happening in our communities, would not be addressing those needs. And so it is very important to pay attention to your statistics, to pay attention to the news and what's happening in communities, various communities. Another program that we thought was interesting, so we have access to something called Policy Map. And each library has been encouraged to sit down with our data analytics person and just take a look at the data that exists on your specific community. And it gets down to, great detail. Like, it can tell you how many food markets are in a specific area. What we learned from one community is it had the highest mortgage loan denial rate for African Americans than any other area in this county. And so some of the programming that they had been focusing on became something that they said, okay, we don't need to focus on this. We need to focus on how we prepare people to be able to get mortgage loans. And so we partner with people who have the same interests. And that program is getting ready to get started. But had that management team not taken a look at the data and listened to people in the community, paid attention to, it had the highest rental rate in the county, then they might not have a program that's valuable to that community. So we go back to how do you evaluate a program's effectiveness? Take a look at how many people actually attend the program and give you feedback. And how many people stay in the program. So one program that we offered, we partnered with a bank, and at the very beginning, you got a gift card for a food market. And it was a financial literacy program. Well, people said that the people wouldn't stay in the program if we gave them the card right from, you know what, we want to see how effective this program is. So we're going to give it to them at the beginning, because if they only wanted the card, guess what? They're not going to come in for the rest of the sessions. Only 2 people dropped out of the program. So again, that's a way to measure the success of a program. How many people entered, how many people stayed, especially through multi-sessions. I mentioned the questions that we ask, and I said one is who benefits from this? Well, one of the questions you need to ask is who does not benefit from this? And because if you don't get at who benefits, the right answer from who benefits, you certainly will get at it from who does not benefit. So if we go back to that STEM program that I was talking about, what we could have said right from the beginning, because who benefits from the school-age children in well-to-do neighborhoods who participate in library STEM programs and enjoy STEM activities. That's who benefited. Well, who was not benefiting? When you looked at the county, well, children in low-income areas were not benefiting from that STEM program. And so that should have been the stop. Who does not benefit from that program? And be able to pivot quickly. The other thing that I think is important is ask the community what they want. So if you can't look at your data to see what's needed in the community, ask your community what they want. But that may mean, and this can be a challenge for some librarians, that may mean leaving your four walls and going into the community and actually asking what they want. And that means showing up in the grocery store, in the laundromat, in the food markets, at festivals, and asking those hard questions. We had a library in the laundromat program. And in some cases, we were teaching people how to use a computer, but in other cases, we were just doing story time in the laundromat. And we did it in a community that was predominantly Hispanic, Latin. I have someone who spoke Spanish on staff and presenting. When we did that program, there were so many people who were hesitant because it was the library and they saw us as a government agency, and as a government agency, we could not be trusted. But it was after that program that they started coming into the branch and using the services more. We are working on making sure we hire staff who look like the people who live in the community, because then you are a little more trusted. We knew that we had a very large community that spoke Amharic, and we didn't have anybody on staff who did. When we finally found someone, hired someone who spoke Amharic, that's when we noticed that the customers were beginning to use the library. And so it's important to hire from within the community and then meet the needs of the community. The other thing that I think in evaluating the value of a program, we also need to stop measuring success as huge numbers. Sure, we offered the Kendi program. We had him, and we had over 1 million people. I think it was more like 2 million when it was more than 1 million for live views, but we had more than 2 million people view the program in total. And it's one of the largest programs we had. And yes, it was during COVID. We had booked him long before COVID, long before the murder of George Floyd. But it was a program that was well attended, and it was, but I think it was because Kendi was hot at the time. The topic was hot at the time. So if we were only going to look at numbers, we would say, oh, that's the best program we ever had. We didn't get much feedback other than thank you for providing this. But what was successful is a program that we were able to provide several library systems, almost all 24 library systems in our state supported it in some way. That meant that the residents all of the state of Maryland were able to take advantage of the program. I would say that was the biggest success, because we have some counties that could never have afforded Kendi, and their residents were able to take part in that. But also we have a number of counties that are predominantly white. We have a number of counties who don't have any persons of color on their staff, and they were able to take part in that. And the residents and the staff enjoyed the program. And so it was an eye opener for some counties that yes, you do have people in your county who are interested in programs that like how to be an anti-racist. And that changed their outlook on the type of program that was provided. The thing that we work on more now is encouraging our staff to provide programs outside of the system mandated celebrations. We also are working on more collaborations. So we've started working with the Department of Health and Human Services to provide social workers in the library. We've partnered with the health department to provide food, sustainable groceries in the library. We partnered with the health department to provide COVID tests and vaccine clinics. And they were provided throughout the county, not just in affluent neighborhoods. We want to make sure that we are really using an equity lens with everything that we do. And like I said, that goes back to who benefits, who doesn't benefit, what was your intent of the program, and making sure our staff have the tools so that when they come up against the people who don't think we should be providing programs like that, they have the tools and the ability to respond to people who think there's certain books we shouldn't have on display, certain programs we shouldn't have in the library, or they believe that we're providing some programs to some people and not programs to others, that they can respond in a way that may not be able to be received from the person hearing it, but it is supportive of the mission of the library. So that really concludes my presentation. And I'd like to open it up for questions if anyone has questions.
Thank you, Michelle and Sharon. We do have a few questions in here. What is your advice in providing diverse programs when your staff isn't diverse?
Well, my advice is to make sure they have the tools to provide a successful program. So one, you really do have to know your staff. If they've not had any diversity training or bias training, I'm not sure they're the ones to provide the program, because if you're providing programs and your audience can see that you're not comfortable, then you've set that program up for failure. So start with training the staff. And, you know, you don't have to be a person of color to provide programs that would be of interest to persons of color, because you more than likely would be hiring an expert. But I would take a look at, when it comes down to story times, are you inclusive in the books that you are using in the story time? Do you have Black and brown people in your picture books that you use for story time? What do your puppets look like? You know, what songs are you singing? And if your books do not look like, or characters in the books don't look like the people you're trying to reach, then that person, someone needs to have a conversation with that person who's selecting those books. Maybe it's about having collection audit, because maybe your system doesn't have the books it needs. But If it's not that, then that means that staff member really needs some training on how to be inclusive in their programming.
Thank you. So we are out of time. That was a great question and great answer. And Sharon, Michelle, and Kelly, thank you guys so much for this really wonderful presentation today. This was really great. And as a reminder, all the materials, the slides, and contact information will be sent around to our attendees. And the next session in the series will be next Wednesday, June 1st. The link is in this chat for you guys to go ahead and register for that. We have a great presentation and a thank you for a wonderful presentation. No more questions, but a lot of really wonderful comments about today's presentation. So thanks again. And
Thank you.
we hope to work with you guys again soon in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.